In 1944, a colossal 141-foot steel giant suddenly appeared in a place no one, friend or foe, expected. The Japanese looked up and froze. American pilots stared at their instruments in disbelief. What they saw defied every rule of warfare. This wasn't just another bomber. It was the B-29 Superfortress, the most advanced, most expensive, and most terrifying aircraft the world had ever seen. A flying fortress so powerful it could rewrite battles before they even started. But on this day, something went wrong. A lone superfortress drifted into enemy skies, off course, unprotected, and surrounded. What happened next became one of the most shocking moments of the entire air war. This is the story of the superfortress that wasn't supposed to be there. The birth of a giant. Long before it found itself wandering into hostile skies, the B-29 began as an answer to a terrifying question. What happens if America needs to reach an enemy that the conch Navy can't get close to, and the Army Air Forces can't bomb conventionally? The answer was simple. You build something no one has ever seen before. The B-29 was that answer. In 1940, the United States was preparing for a war it wasn't officially part of. Europe was burning, Asia was collapsing, and the world understood that distance alone would not protect anyone. American strategists realized something critical. If the US ever fought Japan, it would need an aircraft capable of crossing oceans, not just borders. Nothing in the American arsenal even came close. So Boeing began designing an aircraft that seemed impossible. It would need to fly higher, faster, farther, and heavier than anything before it. It would need to defend itself with guns that didn't even exist yet. It would need engines powerful enough to haul 20,000 pounds of bombs across continents. And it needed to be large, larger than any bomber ever constructed. The concept was radical. The engineers were skeptical. The military was impatient. But the result was history. The B-29 emerged as the most advanced aircraft ever built, costing more than the Manhattan Project itself. When America finally saw it roll out, the Superfortress looked less like a bomber and more like a spaceship. Its pressurized cabin, remote-controlled gun turrets, and enormous wingspan put it decades ahead of anything in the air. It was a war machine built for one purpose: reach the enemy, any enemy, no matter where they are. And in 1944, it made its debut. The Superfortress takes the sky. When the B-29 Superfortress first appeared over Asia, it changed the landscape of aerial operations almost instantly. For years, defenses in the region had been built around the familiar performance of earlier bombers such as the B-17. Their altitude, speed, and range were well understood. Then the B-29 arrived, a 141-foot aircraft. Operating at altitudes near 30,000 feet, moved across the sky with capabilities that surprised observers on the ground. It flew higher, farther, and with greater technical sophistication than anything that had come before it. Pilots who escorted the B-29 often described it as a battleship with wings, not for aggression, but for the sheer size, stability, and self-contained systems it carried. Its defensive turrets were electronically controlled. Its pressurized cabins allowed crews to work in comfort at extreme altitudes, and its engines were among the most advanced of the era. From distant bases in India, China, and later the Mariana Islands, B-29 units undertook missions unlike any attempted before. Routes that crossed mountain ranges, unpredictable weather, and vast expanses of open ocean. They flew farther, carried more equipment, and endured conditions that tested every part of the aircraft. But the B-29 also had its challenges. Its engines demanded careful management, its navigation systems were complex, and its long-distance flights left little room for error. All of this made the aircraft both groundbreaking and, at times, unpredictable. And among the many stories that emerged from its service, one event stands out as the super machine that got lost. It began with a simple mission, a reconnaissance run across the Pacific, routine enough that no one paid it much attention. The crew of the B-29 climbed into their aircraft, strapped in, and took off into the early morning cold. The sun was a faint glow behind them as they pointed the Superfortress toward its planned route. But high altitude flying was unforgiving. Weather shifted unpredictably. Winds at 30,000 feet didn't behave like they did near the ground. And the B-29, despite its technological brilliance, relied on navigation systems that could be thrown off by the slightest miscalculation. At some point, no one knows exactly when the aircraft drifted. Not by a mile or two, by dozens, then hundreds. The pilots believed they were on course. The instruments agreed. but the winds had pushed them so far off the map that they no longer recognized the land beneath them, and the land beneath them was enemy territory. Suddenly, a voice crackled across Japanese lookout posts. A massive aircraft had been spotted, one larger than anything they had ever seen. One far beyond the range the Americans were believed capable of reaching. There was only one problem: it wasn't supposed to be there. The Japanese reaction. When Japanese officers first saw the Superfortress, they assumed it was a new secret weapon, something built to break their defenses, to strike at cities once believed untouchable. Anti-aircraft guns fired wildly, fighters scrambled, command posts sent urgent coded messages, trying to make sense of the impossible sight above them. The B-29 flew on, unaware. It wasn't maneuvering, it wasn't attacking, it wasn't even trying to escape. It was simply drifting, miles off course, like a giant steel whale caught in an unexpected tide. Japanese pilots rushed toward it. They had fought B-17s. They had fought B-24s, they had fought every American aircraft in the Pacific, but nothing prepared them for this. The B-29 was enormous. Its tail rose like a tower, its wings stretched wider than most Japanese airfields were long. And its guns, those smooth, remote-controlled turrets, tracked every fighter that came close, even lost. It was dangerous. But then something became clear. The turrets weren't firing. Either the crew was conserving ammo, or the situation was far worse. Inside the lost super machine, inside the belly of the Puchip machine. 29. The atmosphere shifted in an instant from routine efficiency to a cold, spiraling panic. The flight engineers stared at the gauges in disbelief. Fuel was dropping far faster than it should, leaking away into the endless sky. The radio operator twisted knobs and switched frequencies, but the static never cleared. No contact, no guidance, no voice from home. Below them, the landscape was a patchwork of unfamiliar coastlines and scattered islands, each one looking like the last. The navigator, sweating despite the icy altitude, ran calculations again and again, tracing lines across maps already creased from frantic use. Nothing matched. Nothing made sense. Then came the worst news of all. Enemy fighters, fast, climbing, determined, were closing in. Alarms clattered through the pressurized cabin. Gunners rushed to their stations, eyes scanning the sky through thick glass bubbles. But without direction from the lead gunner, the remote-controlled turrets remained still, waiting for commands that never came. Silence was deadly. The B-29, the most advanced aircraft of the war, suddenly felt blind and helpless. The realization spread across the crew like ice water. They weren't just lost. They were deep inside enemy territory, alone, off course, and easy prey. The pilots exchanged a grim look. They both knew the truth that no one wanted to speak aloud. If the aircraft went down, the Japanese wouldn't just capture them, they would seize the super machine itself. The B-29's pressurization system, its engines, its advanced bomb sights, all of it was top secret technology worth more than the crew's lives. If they crash landed, the enemy would claim the plane intact. If they bailed out, they would end up as prisoners. If they fought, they would burn through the last of their precious fuel. Every option narrowed into the same terrifying reality: their time and their choices were running out. The escape nobody expected. The Japanese fighters formed up behind the Superfortress, waiting for the kill. But what happened next shocked both sides. Instead of turning, climbing, or fighting, the B-29 simply kept going. Its pilots understood something the Japanese didn't. At that altitude, at that speed, the B-29's four massive right R-3350 engines gave it one advantage no enemy fighter could match: endurance. The Japanese could intercept. They could attack, but they couldn't stay in the air long enough to finish the job. One by one, Japanese aircraft peeled away, low on fuel and unable to keep up. The B-29 never fired a shot. It didn't have to. It simply outlasted them. Hours later, running dangerously low on fuel, the lost Superfortress finally found a friendly heading, an island airstrip miles away from its intended destination. The aircraft limped down, engine sputtering, landing gear trembling. The crew stumbled out, shaken but alive. Their aircraft had traveled farther than planned, flown deeper into enemy skies than any B-29 was supposed to, and survived a gauntlet of interceptors without a single defensive burst. The Japanese report later described it as a giant silver ghost that wandered into our territory and vanished before we could touch it. The Americans described it as a mission that should have ended in disaster but didn't. The legacy of the super machine. The B-29 Superfortress went on to define the final year of the war in the Pacific. It leveled industrial zones, destroyed supply chains, and eventually carried out the missions that ended the conflict. But the story of the lost Superfortress became legend. It proved that the aircraft wasn't just powerful, it was resilient. It wasn't just fast, it was enduring. It wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary. The B-29 didn't just change the war, it changed aviation forever. Conclusion. The 141-foot Superfortress that wasn't supposed to be there became a symbol of everything the aircraft represented: power, unpredictability, and technological dominance. It drifted into enemy territory by accident. It escaped by endurance. It survived by design. And it left behind a story that still echoes across the skies of history. Because every aircraft has missions, but only a few have legends, and the B-29 Superfortress was built for legend.